Namaste and welcome. Sale of Goods Act 1930, a overview. We have broadly categorized the scope of Sale of Goods Act into six, mainly formation of the contract, performance of the contract, and rights of unpaid seller and suit for breach of the contract. We will start with the preliminaries. Let us start with goods. Goods includes every kind of movable property other than actionable claims. Actionable claims mainly sundry debtors and bills receivables and cash. It cannot be a subject matter of sale, cash and bank balance. Then what does it include? It includes stocks and shares, growing crops, grass, and things attached to and forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed before sale or under the contract of sale. Things attached to or forming part of the land, like a tree which is agreed to be severed or cut before the sale or under the contract of sale. This is the definition of goods, all movable property, excluding actionable claims and money. Then comes future goods. Future goods. Goods getting ready at a future date. Future goods means goods to be manufactured or produced or acquired by the seller after making the contract of sale. He makes a contract of sale and then goes about manufacturing, producing or acquiring it. Selling without having with you and then creating it. Specific goods. This is opposite of future goods. This means goods identified and agreed upon at the time contract of sale is made. Who is a seller? A person who sells or agrees to sell. Means there are two types of sellers. A person who sells and a person who agrees to sell. How do they differ? We will see. Buyer. Here once again, two types of buyers. Buyers who buys now or who agrees to buy at a later date, just like the seller. Then deliverable state. Goods in a deliverable state means they are in such a state buyer has to take delivery of them, means they are ready to be collected by the buyer. Deliverable state. What is delivery? Delivery is transfer of possession from one person to the other done voluntarily. Means the movable goods are transferred in their possession from one person to another voluntarily. These are preliminary conceptual understanding of the six concepts that we have. We now move on to the second part of sale of goods, that is formation of the contract. Under formation of the contract, we will learn about contract of sale, formalities of the contract, what is the subject matter of contract, what are the matters related to price, and one more important aspect of what are conditions of a sale, what are warranties of a sale. Now here we understand what is a contract of sale. A contract of sale of goods, it may be absolute or conditional. It has got two parts or two nomenclatures, two divisions. Under one, seller transfers property in the goods to the buyer for a price. Seller transfers property in goods to the buyer for a price, and he transfers present. There is one more type. Here in this sale contract of sale, seller agrees to transfer the property to the buyer for a price. Both are common, except in one he transfers straight away. In the second, he agrees to transfer the property in goods to the buyer for a price. Going by the wordings given, where the property in the goods is transferred from the seller to the buyer, the contract is called sale. This is called sale when it is transferred. Where the transfer of the property in the goods is to take place at a future time or subject to some conditions to be fulfilled, that contract is called agreement to sell. Doing now is sale. Agreeing to do at a later date is agreement to sell. To take place at a future time or subject to some conditions to be fulfilled, the contract is called an agreement to sell. These are the two types of contract of sale, today and in future. Then an agreement to sell will become a sale. Means from future it becomes present. At what stage? An agreement to sell becomes a sale when time elapses. We go closer to the future date, or the conditions are fulfilled, subject to which the property in goods is transferred. To be transferred becomes is transferred. When it is transferred, it converts from agreement to sale to sale. Then, to go through, a contract of sale of goods is a contract whereby the seller transfers. When he transfers, it is sale, or agrees to transfer the property in goods to the buyer for a price. The sale may be absolute, which means without conditions, or it may be conditional. A contract of sale may be in writing or by word of mouth, or it may be partly in writing, partly by word of mouth, or it can be implied from the conduct of the parties. It can be implied from the conduct of the. Let us just understand how a sale differs from an agreement to sell under, say, about 8 features. Transfer of property. In a sale, the property in goods immediately gets transferred and it goes to the buyer. Buyer becomes the absolute owner of the property. In case of agreement to sell, the property will be getting transferred when the goods are ready and the transfer takes place. It is at a future date. It is an executory contract. This is an executed contract. Goods, whatever we do under sale, it is existing goods. Under agreement to sell, it is future goods. Risk of loss of property. Loss will be on one person who is the owner of the property. In a sale, the buyer becomes the owner immediately. Therefore, risk goes with the owner. Risk goes with ownership. Owner is buyer. Therefore, risk of loss of property is on the buyer. In case of agreement to sell, the property is yet to pass on to seller. Therefore, to buyer. Therefore, the property is lying with the seller till the sale is made, and hence risk of loss is on the seller. If there is a breach, in this case, you give the property, you don't receive the price. What do? Since the property has already passed on, you can only file a suit for price. Goods are already with him. You can't do anything. You can ask for the price. Your case will be for a price. In case of agreement to sell, we may not give him the goods at all because it is to be done at a future date. If he doesn't pay the price, we can cancel the transaction and we can file a case for damages against him for the loss suffered by us. Right to resell. In case of sale, the property has already moved to buyer. Therefore, seller doesn't have the property and therefore he cannot resell it. in case of agreement to sell, property is still with the seller and he can sell it to someone else, and that is called resell. And when he sells, whoever comes to him to buy for the second time, he will get a good title if he buys in good faith. Right to enjoy the goods. See, absolute owner always enjoy the goods against the whole world. In this case, the buyer is the proper owner of the goods because the sale has already taken place. It is known as the right against the whole world, jus in rem. Whereas in case of agreement to sell, there is an understanding that the goods will be transferred to the buyer, but buyer is not the absolute owner. He has got some rights in relation to the seller. It is in relation to personam, against a person, not the whole world. He has got a right on those goods only with the seller, subject to conditions. What happens if buyer becomes insolvent before payment? Here buyer has already become owner, goods belong to him. If he becomes insolvent, seller cannot take back the goods because goods already belong to him. Then what will the seller get? Seller will get whatever distribution takes place out of its assets, which is known as rateable dividend. For example, if he has a loan of 100,000 and property of only 50,000, only 50% he will get, that is rateable dividend. But in case of agreement to sell, property is still with the seller. He has not yet passed on. And what he can do, if buyer becomes insolvent, he says, I will not sell it to you because the property is with me. I have not yet transferred to you. Seller can refuse to deliver the goods. Then comes, what happens if seller is insolvent before delivery but after payment? The buyer has made the payment but he has not collected the delivery and the seller has become insolvent. Here once again, buyer, payment or no payment, he is the owner. The goods belong to him. Therefore, he can take the goods directly from the seller's custody because it is his goods. In case of agreement to sell, the seller is insolvent. If the buyer has given some advance money, if he has made some payment, once again he can collect only rateable dividend from the liquidator. These are the major differences between sale and agreement to sell. Out of the 5 features, we have seen contract of sale, sale and agreement to sell. Now we will be seeing what are the formalities. Here we are looking into 3 aspects. It's a contract, therefore there is offer and there is an acceptance between the parties. Number 2, there is delivery and payment. It can be immediate or it can be at a future date. It may be postponed. And delivery and payment can be 100% or it can be in installments. Simple. Offer, acceptance, delivery, payment today or at a future date, 100% or installments. These are forming part of formalities of the contract. Then what is the subject matter of the contract? Goods. 2 types of goods. Existing goods which are owned or possessed by the seller, or future goods which are yet to be owned, to be produced, to be procured or to be created. What about the price? Price has to be fixed by the parties, between the parties. What happens if the contract is made without the price? The buyer shall pay reasonable price. What is reasonable price? It depends on the circumstances of the case. Once again, the principle is there should be no unlawful gains and everybody should get proper compensation. Then comes conditions and warranties. The 5th point is conditions and warranties. This we will study under 6 heads. Of that, as we will understand, first, main family of conditions and warranties is known as stipulation, and a stipulation gives rise to 2 types of things, conditions and warranties. As we will see, Number 2 is a condition. Number 3 is a condition. Number 4 is a condition. Number 5 is a condition. And number 6 is a warranty. What is stipulation? What is condition? What is warranty? What is implied condition? See, if a condition is agreed in writing, it becomes an express condition. If it has to be inferred from the situation or inferred based on act, it becomes implied. Let us proceed further. Let us take the stipulation. What is stipulation? A stipulation in a contract with reference to goods may be a condition or warranty. We can call stipulation as a term. It may be a condition or a warranty. What is a condition? Condition is a stipulation which is essential to the main purpose. We have to understand main purpose. Take the condition and find out, is it required for the main condition? Means if it is not there, if there is a breach of it, then the contract could be treated as repudiated or closed. Can we have an example? Yes. You take a race car. In race car, the main requirement is an engine which gives excellent speed. In that case, in a race car, requirement is a stipulation. Speed is a stipulation. We require speed. Is it essential for the main purpose of the car? It is. Can you have a race car without speed? No. In that case, speed in relation to a race car is a condition. When I buy a race car, I say I require speed of 200 kilometers per hour or 300 kilometers per hour. It is not relaxable. It is condition. It is essential to the main purpose. Then what is a warranty? Warranty is collateral to the main purpose. And in case of race car, if the speed is not there, I am going to cancel the contract because it is the main thing. It is condition. In case of warranty, the stipulation is collateral. It is not main. It is subsidiary. What happens? If it is not there, I can make a compromise. It is a breach. I can claim damages. For example, in the race car itself, color. They have got a red color. I say, no, I want black color. Color may be a stipulation, but color is not a condition. It is not required for the main purpose of the car. It can be a warranty. When it is not required for the main purpose, it is called a warranty. Or say chocolate. Sweetness of the chocolate is an essential condition. It has got to be sweet. But its packing, it can be packed in 10 grams, 20 grams, 30 grams. Its size of packing is not essential. It can be any size. It is a warranty. Whether a stipulation is a condition or a warranty depends on construction of the contract. When we build the contract, when we make a contract, we will specify what is the condition and what is the warranty. Only thing to understand, in case of condition, it is basic, it is essential, we cannot live with it, it is essential to the main purpose. In case of warranty, we can live without it. It's just like different sizes of packing of chocolate. We are interested in sweetness of chocolate, not in how many sizes it has been packed. It is essential, it is required, but not essential. It is a warranty. When will we consider a condition into warranty? Where a contract of sale is subject to any condition to be fulfilled by the seller. Here he has to give me a car with 200 km speed. I am the buyer. I can waive the condition. It is up to me. I say, okay, no problem. 100 km per hour is okay with me. Or I can say, your speed is less. I will do one thing. I will not cancel the contract. I will treat the failure as not failure of condition, I will consider it as failure of warranty. I will elect to treat the breach of condition as a breach of warranty. What happens when I say it is a breach of condition? I have to cancel the contract. When I say I want to treat it as a breach of warranty, I can only claim damages. Where a contract of sale is not severable. Severable means it cannot convert it into multiple pieces, and the buyer has accepted a part of the goods. The breach of any condition can only be treated as a breach of warranty. Just to explain, if the order is already implemented and you have received a part of the goods and you cannot sever the order, or you cannot accept it in parts, in that case you cannot have breach of condition. It can only be a breach of warranty. There are two situations where a condition to be treated as breach of warranty. One, buyer himself decides he may waive the condition and treat it as a warranty. Second, when the contract is not severable, there also you have to consider breach of condition as breach of warranty. When you convert a breach of condition to breach of warranty, you cannot cancel the contract, but you can only claim damages. Now we will go to conditions. Let us go to first set of conditions. These are implied. Means in every contract you assume the act says these conditions are there in a contract. What is this condition? Unless circumstances show a different intention, an implied condition of the part of the seller, there is a condition that the seller in a sale, he is selling some goods. We presume that there is a condition implied that he is selling an item where he has got a right to sell. He has got right to sell. That is the basic condition. Otherwise he cannot sell it. This is in respect of existing goods. What about future goods? Agreement to sell are future goods. What does it state? It says there is an implied condition in respect of agreement to sell that he will have a right to sell when the property has to pass. In both cases, in case of sale, he should have the right to sell today, and in case of agreement to sell, he will have a right to sell when the property will pass at a future date. First set of implied condition is right to sell in case of sale as well as agreement to sell. We will go to another set of implied condition. Here we have got three types of sale. There is sale by description, sale by sample, and a combination of both. There is a condition in respect of each. Let us understand that. We have seen one set of condition, right to sell. Here what happens? Here in case of sale by description, there is an implied condition that whatever description he gives, goods match with the description. You explain the feature of the goods, and when I see the goods, I should be able to see that every feature you explained are matching with the goods. Means the warranty here in this case is goods shall correspond with the description, because this is a sale by description. Okay, in a sale by description, goods shall correspond with the description is the implied condition. What about sample? In case of sample, sale by sample, there are three conditions. What is it? Number one, bulk. I buy 100 pens and I have seen one sample. Now bulk is 100. First implied condition is those 100 pens which I am going to buy shall be similar to the sample in quality. In quality, it will be similar to sample, entire 100. Second, the buyer, I am the buyer of the pen, I will have an opportunity to compare the entire 100 with the sample. 100 pieces are there, bulk is there. Bulk, I should have the opportunity of comparing with the sample. Third, the goods shall be free from any defect. Both sample as well as bulk, there should not be any inherent defects. It is being purchased for a particular purpose. And therefore, it says, as a buyer, I have got three implied conditions. One, bulk will compare with the sample in quality. Number two, I will get reasonable opportunity to compare entire quantity with the sample. Number three, the product will be free from any defect so that it remains merchantable. It performs its functions. These three are conditions in a condition of sample. We have seen sale by description, sale by sample. When it is sale by sample as well as description, what is the condition? The goods correspond with the sample and they correspond with the description. Means it is a combination of both A plus B. Whatever conditions we have in sale by description and sale by sample, both should be available when it is a sale by sample as well as description. This is second set of conditions as related to three types of sale: sale by description, sale by sample plus description. Then we have seen two sets of. This condition talks of quality or fitness. The implied condition as to quality or fitness falls under two heads. Let us take the first one. And what are the conditions or what are the expectations before we get this implied condition? One, the goods are bought by description. Second, the seller is one who deals in those goods regularly. If these two conditions are fulfilled, the goods that we buy should be of merchantable quality. They should be true representative of the goods which are being sold. But this condition will be lost if the buyer has examined the goods, and such examination should have revealed defects if any. Means if you have not examined the goods or the defects were not visible by normal examination, and if the goods are sold by description and from a seller who deals in that goods by description, there is a condition that the goods should be of merchantable quality. This falls under quality and fitness. There is one more condition implied. If the buyer makes known to the seller for what purpose he is buying a particular item. He says, I want this for this particular purpose. Then he says he depends upon the skill of the seller for judgment. And the seller is selling the goods of this description in the course of his business. He is conversant with the product. You tell what you want to the seller and you tell him that you depend on his skill, and then he is an expert in the field. If these three conditions are fulfilled, whatever the seller gives you should fit your purpose. That is another condition. It should reasonably fit for such purpose. Merchantable quality and fitness for purpose. This fitness of purpose, when you fulfill these conditions, is available. But if you buy a patented product or a product under trade name or a branded item which has got its own strengths, in such a case, this particular condition will not be applicable. There is no implied condition as to fitness whenever there is a sale of specified article under its patent or other trade name. Means branded items which are under trade name or patent, they cannot carry a fitness for such purpose condition. These are the two conditions which come under implied condition of quality or fitness. This implied condition of quality or fitness is an exception to the principle of caveat emptor. Caveat emptor comes in sale of goods, where it says, customer, or let the buyer beware. You have an opportunity to inspect. Therefore, if there is any defect in the product, you are supposed to check and protect your interest. Therefore, there is no exemption from the principle of caveat emptor. However, the implied condition of quality or fitness appears to be an exception to this principle of caveat emptor, but there are conditions to be fulfilled, and there are exceptions here also. Having seen the conditions, there is one implied warranty. There are three implied conditions, one implied warranty. What is the implied warranty? Implied warranty is quite simple. An implied warranty from the seller that the buyer will enjoy quiet possession of the goods. The goods will be free for him to enjoy peacefully, and it is not mortgaged or pledged or hypothecated or charged to anyone else, any third party. Quiet possession and unencumbered or free from any charge. And this warranty is available to a buyer in the normal course. With that, we say we have seen all these are implied warranty and implied conditions. There can be express warranty and express condition as a part of the contract. But what the law says is, an express warranty or condition cannot exclude implied warranty and implied condition specified in the Act. An express warranty or condition does not negate you a warranty or condition implied by this Act. Means Act is supreme. Whatever conditions you agree in express way, it cannot negate what the Act has given. What Act has given as implied warranty and implied condition, that shall stay and that shall prevail. Thus we have covered contract of sale, formalities of the contract, subject matter of contract, price, conditions, and warranties. And this takes us to the third step of effects of the contract. Let us study effects of the contract under two broad heads. One pertains to transfer of property, and second pertains to transfer of title or sale by non-owners. Here we are talking of transfer of property when the property transfers from seller to buyer. There are certain set of rules which we will study. Section 18 says goods must be ascertained. Ascertained means they should be identified as relating to particular contract. No property in the goods is transferred to the buyer unless and until the goods are ascertained and identified. Once you identify a product with a particular order, they are called as ascertained. Only when they are ascertained, they can be transferred under transfer of property. Going further, it says the property is transferred based on the intention of the parties. The moment the parties intend to transfer the property passes from seller to the buyer. The property in goods is transferred to the buyer at such time as the parties intend it to be transferred. Intention is important. How do I understand the intention of the parties? Intention of the parties is indicated in sections 20 to 24. If we have a look at section 20 to 24, 20, 21 and 22 talk of specified goods. 23 talks of unascertained goods, and 24 talks of goods sent on sale or return basis. Let us understand the rules of how to ascertain intention of the parties for specific goods, unascertained goods, and goods on sale or approval. In case of specified goods, payment or delivery is not important. It is immaterial. The goods are in a deliverable state and the property passes when the contract is made. In a deliverable state, the property in the goods passes to the buyer when the contract is made, and whether you have made the payment or postponed the payment, you have taken the delivery or postponed the delivery is not important. What is important is, are the specific goods in a deliverable state? As we have seen in the definition, deliverable state means the buyer will be able and he shall take delivery of the goods. When he is able to take the delivery of the goods, if it is a specific goods, then the property passes under section 20, 21, 22. 20 we have seen. 21, goods are in a deliverable state, but the seller is bound to do something to put them in a deliverable state. Let us suppose he has to properly pack it, wrap it in plastic. He is bound to do that. Once he does it, it becomes a deliverable state. In such a case, where the seller is bound to do something for the purpose of putting them into a deliverable state, until such thing is done, the property does not pass. Put it the positive way, the moment that something is done, just like we said, wrapping it with a plastic or completing the packing or passing it through the excise gate pass, when you do it and it is done and the buyer has notice of it, once buyer comes to know that the seller has completed what he is supposed to do to put it into a deliverable state, intention is the property passes and it is a specific goods. Third, it's in a deliverable state when the seller, he has to do some operations, like he has to weigh, measure, test, or do some other act, and that act is required to finalize the price. The moment he does those acts and buyer has notice of it, intention is clear, the property passes. Under section 20, 21, 22, goods in a deliverable state, property will pass when the contract is made, payment or delivery is not material. Second, they are in deliverable state and the seller is bound to do certain things to put it into a deliverable state, say packing or wrapping or something like that, and the buyer has notice of it. Third, he has to decide the price. For that he has to do some weighing, measuring, etc. Once he does it and the buyer is aware of it, under these three circumstances, the property under specific goods passes. There is transfer of property, means ownership passes. What about unascertained goods? In case of unascertained goods, where the goods are in a deliverable state, they are unascertained. For example, there is a big accumulation of goods in a warehouse. Out of that, for this particular order, we have to take out 24 items. And those 24 items are removed from the bulk, segregated and marshaled on the dispatch area and written order number so and so, appropriated. Once it is unconditionally appropriated to the contract, and both buyer and seller agree that this is what is for our order. Once they do it, it passes. Unconditional appropriation of an unascertained goods. And sometimes the buyer may not be there to agree, okay, this is unconditionally appropriated. The seller does the appropriation and passes it on or delivers to a transporter to be carried to the buyer. And he says, I don't reserve the right of disposal. You can just go and deliver it to him. It is his. When he delivers it to a transporter and sends it, it is deemed it is unconditionally appropriated. To revisit both these conditions, section 23 says when unascertained goods are unconditionally appropriated by the seller, and if it is accepted by the buyer personally, property passes. If it is unconditionally appropriated and handed over to the courier for transmission to the buyer, and the seller doesn't reserve the right of disposal, property passes. This is section 23. Then comes section 24. Section 24 says when the goods are sent on approval or sale or return basis, it is sent to the buyer. Buyer has to say, yes, it is approved. I am accepting it. It says property will transfer when the buyer signifies his approval of acceptance. Once he says, I have accepted, it becomes his property. From then it is his risk. He has adopted the transaction. Sometimes it so happens he has received the goods. He has to say yes within a specific period, but he is silent. He retains the goods without giving notice of rejection. And the seller will wait for a reasonable time to expire. If the goods are not returned within that period, he presumes the goods are accepted. When goods are sent on approval, on sale or return basis, the buyer, the day he says I have accepted, the property transfers. And the buyer keeps silent and doesn't return the goods even after a specific period. At the end of that period, it is presumed that the property has transferred. This is rule 20 to 24 in respect of specific goods, unascertained goods, and goods sent on sale or return. It is time to understand what section 26 says. Unless otherwise agreed, goods remain seller's risk until the property is transferred to the buyer. Therefore, seller has to be careful to ensure that there is transfer of property on priority. Otherwise, it will continue in his risk. But when the property is transferred to the buyer, the goods are at the buyer's risk, whether the delivery has been made or not. For example, you go to a car garage, you raise an invoice, you identify a brand, say, yes, this is for my order. You become the owner. Subsequently, if there is a fire in the car garage and your car is burnt, loss is not of the car dealer. You can't say I have not taken delivery of the car, but you have identified and ascertained the product and appropriated to your order. When property transferred to the buyer, the goods are at the buyer's risk, whether the delivery has been made or not. Sometimes the delivery is delayed. When the delivery is delayed, whoever is at fault, he will carry the risk. Where delivery delayed through the fault of buyer or seller, the goods are at the risk of party at fault. Section 26 makes it very clear. Once the property is transferred, risk is also transferred. If the transfer of property is delayed intentionally by one of the parties, it will continue at the risk of the party who delays. There is a maxim called nemo dat quod non habet, which means nobody can sell what he doesn't have, or nobody can give what he doesn't have. This is more pertaining to sale of goods by people who are not owners. To this rule, what it says is that if you have something, then only you can give it to me. If you yourself do not have, you can't transfer anything to me. But under transfer of title, there are 4 situations which are listed from 27 to 30, which talks of sale by non-owners, and these are exception to the principle or maxim of nemo dat quod non habet. In addition to these 4, there are 2 more situations. One situation is sale by unpaid seller, which we will see under section 44 separately under Sale of Goods Act. And sometimes official liquidator will sell the goods of the company. We have seen finder of goods can sell perishable goods if the expense crosses 2/3 of its value and the owner is not found, he can sell it. A pawnee who has got a item pledged with him and the pledger doesn't redeem it, he can sell it. There are court receivers who implement court orders. They can also sell the assets identified by the court. These are 6 exceptions to the rule of nemo dat quod non habet. No one can transfer what he doesn't have. We will see this 27, 28, 29, 30 as an exception. No one can give a better title than what he himself has. And these 4, A, B, C, D, we will see under transfer of title. And this we will see under unpaid seller. This is a common principle that anything that is sold by an official liquidator, finder of goods, or pawnee in default, or court receiver, although they are not owners, they are authorized to sell. This is they can transfer the title. Let us see these 4 people who are. Section 27 talks of sale by a person who is not the owner. If we take the case of a mercantile agent, we presume he is expressly authorized by the owner. And he is not the mercantile agent, is not the owner of the goods. He has got a principal who is the owner of the goods. We presume he is selling under the authority. The owner of the goods should ensure that the mercantile agent or whoever he sells, he has got the authority to sell. Supposing the mercantile agent sells and a third party buys, the third party will get transfer of title provided he acts in good faith and he has no notice that the seller has not authorized the sale. It goes by gentleman's agreement in good faith, presuming, because a mercantile agent in the normal course of his dealing, he is authorized to sell goods on behalf of his principal. That is section 27, sale by person, not the owner. Now, joint owners. If one property is held jointly by co-owners, the possession will be with one of the co-owners. And as an exception to the maxim, it says, if one of several joint owners has the possession by the permission of other co-owners, the property is transferred. Once again, the buyer acts in good faith and he has no notice that seller has no authority to sell. Once again, joint owner can sell, buyer will get a title provided he acts in good faith. Section 29. This is sale by a person in possession under a voidable contract. If someone has bought an item under coercion or misrepresentation, it is a voidable contract. But before it is avoided by the seller, since he has got the property in his possession, before the contract is rescinded, if he sells it to a buyer, it is a sale by a person in possession under voidable contract. He can transfer the title although he is not the owner, provided, once again, the same rider, buyer buys them in good faith and he has no notice of seller's defect of title. Section 29. All buying in good faith. Fourth one, seller or buyer in possession after sale. Let us take the first case. There is a seller who has already sold, but he is having possession of the goods with him. The buyer has not yet taken the possession. But this seller mischievously sells it again to another buyer, where a person having sold goods continues in possession of the goods or documents, delivers or transfers the goods under any sale, pledge or disposition. What happens if someone buys from him? Section 30 says, seller who is in possession after sale, he can transfer the title provided the buyer acts in good faith and he has no notice of the previous sale and he will acquire proper title. Section 30 also talks of possession after sale by the buyer. Buyer must have just taken it under having bought or agreed to buy goods. The buyer obtains possession and he sells it off. The person, because he is not supposed to sell till he converts his agreement to sell into sale and makes payment, and that way he gets the ownership. But since he has got a possession, he simply sells it, delivers or transfers under sale. There is transfer of title possible. The person receiving the same in good faith without notice of the irregularity acquires good title. Section 27, 28, 29 and 30, they all talk of one thing in common. Anyone who buys in good faith without knowledge of the defect buys from a person who is not the owner, a person who is a joint owner in possession, a person who holds goods under voidable contract, and a seller or buyer in possession after sale. In all four cases, transfer of title is possible, and this is an exception to sale by non-owners as mentioned under the magazine. The above are 4 out of 6 instances under sale by non-owners under the maxim nemo dat quod non habet. No one can transfer what one doesn't have. Thus, we have covered effects of the contract, transfer of property and transfer of title or sale by non-owners. That takes us to the fourth aspect of it, performance of the contract. 6 points we need to note here in the flow. We will be studying under performance of the contract, duties of seller and buyer, payment and delivery, what type of conditions are they, what are rules of delivery, buyer's right to examine, what is acceptance, and neglecting or refusing delivery of goods. These 6 aspects will be covered in this. We will have a proper study. Duties of seller and buyer. It is the duty of seller to deliver the goods and it is the duty of the buyer to accept and pay for them in accordance with the terms of contract of sale. This is a part of performance of contract. Payment and delivery. The seller shall give possession in exchange for price and the buyer shall pay price in exchange for possession. Means it is give and take. They are concurrent conditions in the normal course under section 32. There are rules as to delivery. What are the rules as to delivery? Delivery of goods made by doing anything parties agree has the effect of putting the goods in possession of the buyer. These are all major things. A delivery of part of goods has the same effect as a delivery of the whole. But delivery of a part of the goods with an intention of severing from the whole does not operate as a delivery. Means delivery of a part is as good as delivery of the whole unless there is an intention of separating one from the other. Section 35. Apart from express contract, the seller will not deliver unless the buyer applies for delivery. Means the initiative has to come from the buyer asking for delivery of goods under the contract. There are certain rules as to delivery. Goods sold are to be delivered at the place at which they are at the time of sale. Goods which are not there but they are agreed to be sold, they shall be delivered at the place they are produced. Where no time is mentioned in the contract, it has to be delivered within reasonable time. Where the goods are in the possession of a third person, if the third person acknowledges to the buyer that he holds the goods, that is a delivery. Demand or tender of delivery made, it has to be made at a reasonable hour. Expenses of deliverable state, seller has to bear these expenses. These are enumeration of standard conditions which are there under rules as to delivery. Few more rules we need to see. Delivery of wrong quantity. Where the seller delivers a quantity less than contracted, the buyer may reject them fully. If the buyer accepts, he will give payment for the quantity accepted at the contract rate. What happens if he delivers quantity larger? Then the buyer can accept as per contract and reject the excess. He also has the option to reject the whole, or he can accept the whole and pay at contract rate. If the seller delivers mixed with goods of different description, the buyer can accept in accordance with the contract and he can reject the rest, or he has an option to reject the whole. In other words, delivery, the buyer has an option to say, I want exactly what I ordered. And if he receives less or more, it is his discretion whether to accept it partially or to reject it fully or accept it fully. Installment deliveries also, it says the buyer is not bound to accept delivery in installments. And where contractually deliverable, if the contract itself is for installments on the terms of the contract and the circumstances, the breach of the contract to be termed as repudiation of the whole. Means you are supposed to do it in installments. If there is a breach, it will not be a breach of one installment. You can consider it as a breach of the whole, or it is a severable breach. Delivery to a carrier, as we saw, when the seller delivers to a carrier or wharfinger, it is deemed to be a delivery to the buyer. The seller shall make such contract with the wharfinger in proper respect to the nature of goods and the circumstances of the case. This is other general rules of delivery, which is an enumeration. We have seen duties of seller, payment and delivery as concurrent conditions, rules as to delivery, and comes buyer's right of examining the goods. Where the buyer has not previously examined the goods, the seller is bound to afford the buyer reasonable opportunity of examining. Buyer has got a right to examine the goods before he accepts the delivery. And there is one more condition on acceptance. The buyer is deemed to have accepted the goods when he intimates the seller that he has accepted them, or he receives the goods, does something which is inconsistent with the ownership of the seller. Even if he receives the goods, he doesn't say accepted, but he starts consuming it, means he is taking away ownership of the seller, and the action is inconsistent with the ownership of the seller. Or, as we saw, after a lapse of reasonable time, he retains the goods and he doesn't reject. In that case also, it is known as acceptance. Acceptance in three ways. One, full-fledged acceptance. Number two, doing an action inconsistent with the owner of the seller. Third, not rejecting within the period of expiry in case of sale by sample or sale or return basis. And when the seller is ready and willing, requests the buyer to take delivery, buyer does not take within a reasonable time, he is liable to the seller for any loss occasioned by his neglect. As we saw, if there is a delay in delivery, the person who causes the delay will be running the risk of the property, and the person who holds the goods shall take reasonable charge for care and custody of the goods. Duties of seller and buyer we have seen. It is a duty of seller to buyer except it is concurrent conditions. Possession and price concurrent. Rules as to delivery we have seen in detail. And that brings us the closure of performance of the contract. And next stage will be rights of unpaid seller. Here we will study the unpaid seller, his lien, stoppage in transit, effect of subsale, and transfer by buyer and seller. Who is an unpaid seller? The seller of goods is deemed to be an unpaid seller when the whole of the price has not been paid or tendered, or the negotiable instrument, say check, received as conditional payment has been dishonored. If any of these two conditions fulfilled, he becomes unpaid seller. What are unpaid seller's rights? He has got three rights: a lien on the goods for the price while he is in possession of the goods. In case of insolvency of the buyer, he has a right of stopping the goods in transit when he has parted with the possession. Here there is possession when he is using the lien. When he is parted with the possession and the buyer is insolvent, he has got the right of stopping, and he has got a right of resale as permitted by the Act. Where the property has not passed to the buyer, the unpaid seller has a right to withhold delivery along with right of lien and stoppage in transit. Three rights all put together, even where the property has passed to the buyer. What is unpaid seller's lien? The unpaid seller of goods who is in possession can retain possession until payment under three conditions. Goods have been sold without credit, therefore he can retain. Where goods have been sold on credit, the credit has expired, or the buyer has become insolvent. The seller may exercise his right of lien notwithstanding the possession of goods as agent or bailey of the buyer. Even where the property belongs to the buyer, the unpaid seller under these three circumstances can exercise his lien. And even when there is a part delivery, where an unpaid seller has made part delivery, he can exercise the right of lien on the remainder unless the initial part delivery was made showing an intention to waive the lien. Unless there was an intention, he can use the lien against the balance part delivery also. When does the lien terminate? The unpaid seller of goods loses his lien where he delivers the goods to a carrier without reserving the right of disposal. Once you lose the possession, you lose the lien. When the buyer or his agent lawfully obtains possession, buyer comes and collects the goods, the lien is gone. Or the lien holder says, I am waiving the right. These three situations, the lien comes to an end. The unpaid seller of goods having a lien thereon doesn't lose his lien just because he has obtained a decree for the price. For example, he has filed a case in the court. The court grants him a decree. Court decree does not mean he should release the goods. He still has got his lien intact. Now, this is regarding unpaid seller's lien, what happens in part delivery, and when the termination of lien takes place. Mainly when you lose possession, you lose lien. And there is one more right of his, stoppage in transit. How does it happen? Right of stoppage in transit. An unpaid seller who has parted with the possession, he has given it to the transporter for delivery. He has the right of stopping them in transit under one special situation, when the buyer becomes insolvent. When can he use it? So long as the goods are in transit from his place to the buyer's place and buyer has not collected the goods, he can resume possession in the course of transit. And once he collects from the transporter back, he can retain it until payment of price. That is the stoppage in transit. What is the duration of transit? We can just go through this. Goods deemed to be in transit until the buyer or his agent takes delivery. If the buyer or his agent obtains delivery even before arrival at their destination, the transit ends. If after arrival the transporter acknowledges to the buyer, he calls him and says, I am holding goods on your behalf, transit is at an end. Or if the goods are rejected by the buyer and bailey continues, the transporter continues to possess them, the transit is alive because the buyer has rejected. Once he rejects, transit is in favor of the seller. And sometimes the transporter wrongly refuses to deliver it to the buyer. Then transit by default comes to an end. And where part delivery is already made, as we saw, he can also use the remainder for stopping in transit, and unless such part delivery was made showing agreement to give up possession. Simply put, duration of transit continues till buyer or buyer representative collects it, or the transporter confirms to him over phone or something that he is holding on his behalf, or the transporter wrongly refuses to deliver the goods. In these three situations, the transit expires. But if the buyer rejects the goods, the transit continues and it is in favor of the seller. How stoppage in transit is effected? By taking actual possession of the goods, the seller will give a notice to the carrier not to deliver. Such notice to the person who is in possession of the goods or to his principal. The principal will communicate to his servant and stop the delivery to the buyer. and moment the transporter gets the notice, he shall redeliver to the seller, and expenses of redelivery will be paid by the seller. These are all procedural things which are routine. Fourth one, effect of subsale or pledge by buyer. For example, if the buyer is having the goods and if he has already disposed of, what happens to the subsale or pledge by the buyer? The unpaid seller's right of lien or stoppage in transit is not affected by any sale or disposition by the buyer. However, where a document of title to goods is transferred to another person, and as we saw, that other person acted in good faith and for consideration, the sale is valid and right of lien or stoppage is defeated. Pledge or other disposition, it will be subject to rights of the transferee. Effectively, any subsale or pledge by the buyer based on the documents in his possession will hurt the right of lien or stoppage, and to the extent he has pledged, the rights of the transferee will prevail on them. And there is one more aspect here now, transfer by buyer and seller. Here we have seen in case of Bailey, where the goods are of a perishable nature, the unpaid seller who has exercised a right of lien or stoppage in transit, what he need to do, just like a Bailey, he has to give a notice to the buyer, intention to resell, and he should tell him that if you don't tender the price within a reasonable period of time, he will be selling it, and any loss occasioned by the breach, he will be responsible. And one point here to note, whenever against the lien or against repossession, if there is a profit, the buyer shall not be entitled. The seller can retain the amount. But if the notice was not given by the seller, buyer shall be entitled to the profit. And as we have seen, whenever there is a sale subsequently under this clause 54, which is a sale by non-owner, which we saw under transfer of title, the buyer gets a good title as against the original buyer, provided he acts in good faith and he has no notice of any irregularity. And when this happens, the original contract gets terminated and the latest sale becomes the valid sale recognized by law. Thus, under rights of unpaid seller against the goods, we have seen unpaid seller and his various rights and how he goes about. That brings us to the last aspect of sale of goods, which is suits for breach of the contract. Basically, there are about 8 aspects here now: suit for price, damages, specific performance, remedy for breach of warranty, repudiation, interest, and there are 2 special aspects of auction sale and taxes. Let us take the first one, suit for price. The seller may sue the buyer for the price according to the terms of the contract when he wrongfully neglects to pay the price. When he doesn't pay, you can file a case against him, where the property in goods has passed to the buyer, or the price is payable on a particular day, even where the property has not passed. Means you can file a case for price when the property has passed, even if the property has not passed. If as per contract he was supposed to pay the price on a particular day, in both cases, for his wrongful neglect to pay or refusal to pay, we can go to court and file a suit for price. Damage. Seller may sue damages for non-acceptance where the buyer wrongfully refuses to accept and pay. Similarly, under section 67, buyer may sue if there is no delivery where the seller wrongfully refuses to deliver. Means both of them can go to court and seek damages either for non-acceptance or for non-delivery. Under Specific Relief Act 1963, for non-delivery or non-acceptance, damages alone are not enough. The Specific Relief Act says when you have committed to deliver or accept, if the circumstances permit, there should be specific performance. Means you should actually either deliver or accept as per the contract. Subject to the provisions in any suit, breach of contract, to deliver specific or ascertained goods, the court may direct on the application of the plaintiff that the contract shall be specifically performed, giving the defendant option of retaining the goods on payment of damages. Means even when there is a damage claim, there can be a specific performance if one resorts to Specific Relief Act 1963. Then we have got remedy for breach of warranty. What are the remedies? Where there is a breach of warranty by the seller, we have seen the warranty, where the buyer elects or is compelled to treat it as breach of warranty. When it is breach of warranty, you cannot reject the goods, but he can set up against the seller breach of warranty for extinction of price. He say, I will not pay the price, or he can seek damages. Remedy for breach of warranty. One, you can refuse to pay. Means here, if you say extinction of the price, means you avoid paying the purchase price for the defective goods, saying it is merchantability, it is not meeting the warranty at all. First, you don't pay the price. Second, you can also seek damages, or you can go for one of them. This is the remedy for breach of warranty. Suit for price, damages, specific performance. We have seen remedy for breach of warranty. Then it talks of where either party to a contract of sale repudiates the contract before date of delivery. They want to cancel the contract before the date of delivery. The other party can wait till the date of delivery for the liability to crystallize, or immediately he can treat the contract as rescinded and he can sue for damages. Means if one of the parties repudiates the contract, the other party can apply to the court for damage. They can do it either immediately after the rescinding, or they can wait till the due date and file the case immediately thereafter. There is interest by way of damages. On interest, we have a small provision. The interest could be claimed by the seller for the amount of the price from the date on which it was payable. The buyer, when the delivery has not taken place and he has paid the price, he can ask for refund of the price and he can claim interest from the date on which the payment was made till the amount is refunded. Interest by way of damages and special damages, it is both ways. It depends on who has failed to perform and he will pay interest while refunding the amount to the other party. This is regarding the rights of the parties. There is one topic called auction sale. We can just go through its features. In an auction sale, each lot is deemed a separate contract of sale. The sale is complete when the fall of the hammer or in any other customary manner, and till the hammer falls, the party can withdraw his bid. Normally there is a bar on the seller participating in the bid, but if at all he is participating, it should be expressly disclosed. And once it is disclosed, the seller or his representative can participate in the bid. Where the right to bid on behalf of the seller is not lawful, where the sale is not notified, and if the seller fraudulently participates, then it becomes a contract attracting fraud. Where the sale is not notified to subject to right to bid on behalf of the seller, it shall not be lawful for the seller to bid himself or to employ any person to bid at such sale. This is more of procedural do's and don'ts for a seller. And in an auction, there can be a reserve price to start with. That is a minimum price from where the quotes will start. And if there is a pretended bidding by the seller or his representatives to mislead, the sale is voidable at the option of the buyer. This is just to cover what an auction sale represents and how does it work. We have a last topic here now, tax on goods. After you have made a contract, if there is a tax revision and if there is an increase in tax, the seller can add it in the invoice and recover from the buyer. If there is a downward revision of tax by the government, the buyer can reduce it from the invoice and make the payment. This is regarding tax on goods not chargeable at making of the contract. This is a subsequent development to contract. Thus, under suits for breach of the contract, suit for price, damages, specific performance, breach of warranty, repudiation of the contract before due date, interest on amounts due, auction sale, and tax on goods. That brings us to the end of the topic of sale of goods, wherein we have covered from preliminary, formation, effects of contract, performance of contract, rights of unpaid seller, and suits for breach of the contract. The detailed contents we could see here on what are the aspects that we did see under each of the 6 heads, starting from preliminary, goods, future goods, specific goods, seller, buyer, deliverable state, formation, contract of sale, formalities, subject matter of contract, the price, conditions and warranties, transfer of property, ascertained goods, rule of section 21, 20 to 23, 24, goods sent on approval basis, risk passes with goods under 26, sale by non-owners, joint owners, sale by person in possession after sale, performance of the contract, duties of seller and buyer, payment and delivery are concurrent conditions, rules as to delivery, buyer's right of examining the goods, acceptance, neglecting or refusing delivery of goods, unpaid seller, his lien, stoppage in transit, effect of subsale, and transfer by buyer and seller. Last, we talked of suits for breach of the contract, suit for price, damages, specific performance, remedy for breach of warranty, repudiation before due date and claim for damages, interest claimed by both buyer and seller, auction sale, last, revision of tax on the goods. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.